Hey, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Evolution Project podcast, where I bring on my friends who are amazing and I introduce them to the world because the reality is God has blessed me with some of the coolest people in my life. And what I found is one of my greatest joys is connecting my friends with my friends. And the podcast is a great way that I can do this. Today, I have Sir Matthew Clark. This is a man that I can truly say, first word that comes to my mind when I think of him is love. That is the first thing I thought of. Because what our text message was yesterday, I was like, I just love you, bro. And you're like, love you too, man. I want to introduce everybody to you because there are two versions of you that I have known amongst many versions, right? So the first version that I knew of Matthew Clark was a man that ran CrossFit 801 that later became the Phoenix. And if you asked me to describe you back then, I would say disciplined dude that was clockwork. In the office every day, one of the strongest dudes in the gym, focused, dialed in, and absolutely somebody that helped me in my physical journey. That's like, I got to know you in that light. Fast forward over a few years, all of a sudden I meet this dude that is like, I describe you as, have you ever seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The character of Sean Penn where he's like, dude, what's up? It's like all of a sudden this guy is like, before I know it, he's like going to Hawaii and just kind of like living off grid for a little bit. And before I know it, he's doing breath work and he's doing cold plunges in the middle of like ice, freezing cold rivers. And I'm like, what is going on with Matthew Clark? This is not the guy that I knew. Can you like fill us, obviously evolution project, evolution, change. Can you kind of start out as you introduce yourself? Like, I've introduced two versions of you. How would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's been a lot of different versions of myself, and
Yeah.
I think my journey in life has led me to the point where the version of myself that I'm actively building now is the one that's most important. And at different times in my life, I've experienced a lot of certainty and thinking that I had life figured out, only to have those paradigms turned completely upside down of my own volition and of my own seeking, questioning, and experiencing. So I would say that I am a human being first. I don't really attach too intensely with a lot of labels anymore.
So good.
But that being said, I mean, I appreciate what you said about love because at my core, I'm a lover. I've realized that's what this experience is about,
Yeah.
at least energetically. So yeah, that works.
I remember one time I was listening to a meditation with Deepak Chopra, and the opening line is he said, I am the assumed identity of Deepak Chopra as you know me. It's like, and at first I was like, that is probably accurate because the reality is I'm not even who I think I am. I'm who you think I am.
Right. Yeah. Layers of projection.
Yes, exactly. Right. So this is a really interesting, intro to the conversation.
But I will share just a little more that came to me because in looking at those two characters from a decade ago, one example I'll give you. A decade ago, I ate really healthy. That being said, it's because of like the analytics and the knowledge around nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I also eat very healthy, very good for my body, but it's a somatic practice. It's because I'm in my body more than I used to be. I'm an Aquarius. I've always been a very analytical and, active mind and brain. And I still am today, but I notice that for what it is and realize that there's a lot more to my being than just what's going on in my brain.
That's right. That's right. Interesting, right? I mean, this is going to be a great conversation because one of the practices that I've been able to experience with you is this thing called breath work, which is interesting in itself because to this point in my life and your life, and hopefully everyone's life that's been listening to this podcast is you have been breathing tens of thousands of times a day. What was the most important breath? Probably the last one that you took, but it's this whole concept of like, we've all been breathing our whole life. But then when you say, well, what is breath work? That seems an interesting concept. How would you answer that question if somebody says, well, breath work. What's that? And kind of the layer into this is one of the practices that Matthew teaches that he facilitates is called breath work. And that's actually one of the things we really want to dig into today, because I know for me, some of the most profound experiences I've had in my life have involved this thing called breath work. What is that? How would you describe that to somebody?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I'm trying to describe things, I try to always use a balanced framework. I think there's two sides oftentimes to everything.
Hmm.
At its core, I would say breathwork is nothing more than consciousness around breathing. So like you said, we've all been breathing for our entire lives. I used to be a high performing athlete in high school, college, and a little bit beyond. And I was always breathing. Breath was a major part of that process from a biological, level and chemical level. But the awareness around it, I had practically zero until my early 30s, for sure. I just turned 40, so getting there. Breath work, though, is a consciousness around breathing, and then there's two parts to that. So one is just being able to observe your breath and actually see with your eyes closed, right? Feel
Mm,
what is going on, because breath is ultimately a bridge. It's a bridge from your conscious to your subconscious. It's a bridge to all of your autonomic nervous system. So everything going on inside the body that we cannot control of our own effort of force, we can influence and control through our breath.
mhm,
So that's number one, is just conscious awareness, observation of breath. And then the other side of it would be manipulating the breath to achieve a different outcome with your state, to self regulate. So you
mhm.
can activate your nervous system, you can balance it, or you can calm it down. Yeah,
So I have
that
a
is breath work.
So I think a key indicator in this is one of the things that you specialize in, or a modality of breath work you specialize in, is called somatic breath work. What does that mean? I mean, I think you kind of hit a few things in it, but what is it? Because there are a lot of different modalities of breath work. I talked to you before where there's breath work where I've gone in and it's a track and I lay down and I'm just kind of like doing this breath over and over again, kind of like those like mills that get water. It's kind of that is one form, but I would not call that somatic.
Yeah. Okay, here's how I'll try to bridge this. So almost all breath work modalities, I shouldn't say almost all. There's different techniques for sure and different cadences of breathing, but
Mhm,
most of them, at least the activating breath work, will utilize what's called conscious connected breathing, where
mhm,
ultimately you're looping together breaths, inhalations and exhalations, without a pause at the top or the bottom. And then the majority of the work, all the work, is really on the inhale. And so it's again kind of a 50-50 in a way, balanced work, because half of it you're just flying, right? Soma, the root of that word is essentially it's a body practice. It's an embodied practice.
mhm,
So somatic work of any kind is getting out of the prefrontal cortex of our brain, analyzing, judging, criticizing, trying to understand. And the breath ultimately is a bridge down again into the subconscious. That's the somatic activation, the body activation. So breathing is somatic, yoga is somatic, dance is somatic. I mean, there's a lot of different movement modalities where people can essentially experience some sort of somatic healing.
If you are listening to this and you have not had the chance to do a breathwork session, there's going to be an opportunity for you to do that on the 17th of March. We're going to be doing a breathwork session together. That being said, Matthew actually does breathwork sessions often. And the reason I'm bringing this up right now is in every practice, there is a head conversation. So it's like, what's actually happening? But then there is a heart conversation where it's like, what is the embodiment inside of me that's going on right now in this unique experience? You could have a room full of 20 people and you're getting 20 completely different experiences that are happening at the same time, right? You've been a witness to this multiple times, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the head conversation piece, to use your verbiage, I mean, that conscious connected breathing in conjunction with holding your breath holds, it does a number of incredible things to the body. sensationally. We
Yeah.
produce oxytocin, serotonin, DMT. So people are actually experiencing these chemical and neuro, transmitter changes, as well as changing potentially states of consciousness,
Hmm.
as well as getting down into the body where all of our emotional coding and or trauma as mammals, this isn't just human beings, but as mammals, we store in the body. The trick here, or the tricky part, I would say, about being a human, because other animals, when they experience, very traumatic or emotionally triggering things in life, they have a built-in mechanism, a physical mechanism to release it. They have a somatic release. It's usually pretty violent, aggressive shakeout to get rid of that, or rather to transcend that state where they're either fight, flight, or freeze.
Hmm.
Human beings, we don't have this inherently. We weren't taught this. And not only that, but we were taught essentially, especially here in the West, to suppress, repress, to not feel,
Yeah.
to hold it down. And the issue is over time, it gets stored. It affects our cellular health. It affects all of the systems of the body, which again is why this practice can go in and essentially where something like talk therapy starts in the brain trying to go down and figure out what's going on.
Hmm.
Breath work or other somatic practices just drop right into the body
Hmm.
and then allow the processing to be a little bit more naturally. So in a funny way, like, and again, this is a very Western thing. This is very much how I was raised, like wanting to analyze it, figure out all the mechanics of it, what's going on, why. Sure, like we can go to that end, but for many people, it actually becomes somewhat of a barrier because it is, again, just like an experiential thing. And with
Yeah.
each breath you take in, right, your future, and you can release your past. So that kind of sudden enlightenment or sudden release of trauma, of old patterns, of addiction, of whatever it is, can be instantaneous with your very next breath.
I remember one of my first breathwork sessions. This one was not with you, but it was one of my first ones. This is like years ago. I went to this 2-day, it was like a Navy SEAL kind of leadership training thing. It was down in Encinitas, California with a guy named Mark Devine and just an incredible man, like physically a specimen, but he had this concept where he talked about the 5 peaks and he talked about, these different peaks. It's not just if you get somebody that's all physical, but they haven't developed their intellectual and their inner, spiritual or whatever you want to call that. It's like that could be a dangerous man, right? And he talked about these 5 peaks that we're trying to develop so that when we show up, we have embodied these things and this is how we show up. So anyway, the way this whole 2 days was set up is they'd like teach you a lesson and then they just would grind you. We'd go down to the beach. We're running with logs and putting sand on our bodies and going in the ocean and lifting hard stuff. And I mean, you can exhaust the body pretty quickly. It's not a crazy science. By the way, this was back in my CrossFit 801 days, so I did feel up to the
Shout out.
challenge. Shout out. I remember, dude. I remember at the end of one of the things, the guy, like everyone is cooked and there's a pull-up bar and he looks at me and I got my backpack, like little rucksack on. He looks at me and he goes, "Hey, if Hurd can do a pull-up on this, everybody gets a break or whatever." And I was like, ego, please kick in right now. Ego, find the strength. Dude, I do a pull-up. Raw. And I was like, I felt very validated in that moment. So shout out to Matt Clark to help me to do that. Anyway, the reason I'm sharing this little story is at the end of the experience, physically, my body was cooked. Like never before had I taken myself to that limit consistently over a period of 2 days.
Yeah.
And at the end, this dude comes in and he's like, "We're going to do a breathwork session." And I'm thinking, what in the hell are we doing a breathwork session for? I've been breathing my guts out for the last couple of days. And he starts in with this breathwork session, and it was a very intense one. It was it was very much a forced, like you
Yeah,
said,
very activating.
very activating. And by the way, he's got this like music that's just inspiring. I remember there was one point of the breathwork session where he's like, "You're a Viking warrior and you're running down the hill in battle to protect your family." And I was like, "Oh, let's go." And like, what's interesting that I've learned about myself with breathwork is I am a very person where I tap in my emotion of what I would call like rage, anger, like that. Like I tap that in because there were just some experiences in my life where I was like, I don't want to unleash this on people. And so I just made a decision. I'm going to keep it in me. Well, dude, during this breathwork session, I just let it all out, dude. I'm going freaking bananas. probably looked like I was possessed by a demon, right? And at the end, I'm laying there on the ground when it's all done. And all of a sudden, by the way, tensies kicked in. So my hands are like this. And I'm like, and all of a sudden, dude, it felt like an electrical current just plugged into me. And it was like, and I felt like I had no boundary anymore. I felt as big as the room. I was just kind of like going around. And when that finished, I was like, what in the hell was that? I had never experienced anything in my life like that. And I just remember sitting up and I was like looking around and I was like, what just happened? And that was my first experience with breathwork. And I remember it opened something inside of me. And then as I started to do it more in different modalities, what I found is there'd be a breathwork session I'd be doing, and all of a sudden I just couldn't stop laughing. I would just be laughing like a little kid, joyful laughing. There'd be a breathwork session in the same session sometimes where I would start crying, and I mean uncontrollably crying. And I'm like, where's this coming from? And it's what you said. You said, as humans, right, we don't have this shake off ability
Yeah.
when we experience trauma. And what do? We just say, I'm going to store that down, push it down a little bit more, push it down a little bit more. And, here we are, we're 35, 40, 50 years old, and we're feeling all these things or not feeling at all, maybe,
Yeah.
which is, I think, even more dangerous, possibly.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, there's an excellent book you might have read. It's called Waking the Tiger. It's one of the one of the highly referenced books around trauma, modern day science research on it. And one of the important things there, or that I took from it, is just that the reality that like trauma, what we speak of as trauma, it's not actually what happened, right? It's not the story. Because the reality is like human memory is not that great, like by all measures.
Well, we change it. We change the story.
Exactly. So the issue isn't what happened, but it's what got stuck. Okay. And it's either A, not being able to have that release that we already talked about, the release in general, but B, what's crazy is one of the reasons that those emotions get stuck is that we experience those emotions without an empathic witness. Okay. Like we experience that depth of unresourceful negative emotion and we are alone. And that's one of the reasons that whether it's a breathwork journey that's facilitated, guided, whether it's a guided meditation, any somatic practice where there's someone that's actually holding space, it's literally being able to experience those depths of emotion that you need to, that's stored. You don't know you need to until it's there, whether it's the laughing, the crying, whatever, but actually feeling held and safe to be there. And that safety, that embodied safety is as primal to us as love is, maybe second only to love.
I'm going to really encourage anyone listening to this to I'm pausing for reverence and to let that hit. Because what you just said is pretty freaking profound. I mean, to be witnessed, to be held, to feel safe. I mean, you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The baseline is these basic things, right? Food, shelter, belonging, safety. You look at, one of the things I've thought about a lot actually is like, we take a lot of this stuff for granted. Like, I mean, when was the last time I woke up and thought, man, I hope the lights turn on today and the water is purified. I hope that, our war-torn country, my house doesn't get bombed. I hope we have food as I'm starving to death. Those are things that, like, the reality is we really haven't experienced. We've maybe experienced loneliness or some of these things, but at the core, it's like we're pretty blessed. We have a lot of things, and yet we still have all this suppressed trauma, suppressed emotions, that it's like, heaven forbid if I opened that Pandora's box or I shared it with somebody out loud. Heaven forbid, what is Matthew going to think of me?
Yeah.
Right. And it's so sad. It's so sad because that which is most private is most universal. Turns out the second that I give voice to that part of me that I've been just doing everything I can to keep the lid on, that's killing me inside, right? And oftentimes this is a lot of like inner child work.
Sure.
This is those places, I I'm going to give a shout out to Henry and Anders right now, our two little boys, our walking Buddhas. Will you maybe talk a little bit about what you've learned from Henry as a father? I
Yeah,
know
of
this is a little bit of
course.
a change, but I see you with him and it brings a smile to my face every time. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old son named Henry. His mom and I are not together. We were married, but we've been divorced for 5 years, just
Mm.
for context. And Henry is, I mean, he is a walking embodiment of love, even up to 6 years old yet. Like I have not seen like any very, very minimal like anger, manipulation, certainly not like guilt and shame, which were two pieces that I had a lot of in my youth. My understanding, so you asked what I've learned from Henry. These children, especially ages 2 to 8 years old, right? Like they're just walking around sponges. They're in a constant theta brainwave state, just completely downloading their environment. And so a lot of the youth development, as I understand it, is essentially those ages 2 to 8, all the like formidable foundational programs get laid, and then their next 8 years are essentially walking around embodiments of whatever those first 8 years were. And
Mhm.
it's pretty wild way to think about that, as we know how big a influence school, middle school, high school is on all of us, where the experts essentially say that 75% of who we are is developed by the time we're about 8 to 10 years old, which is pretty wild. Yeah, I made that remark about Henry, just the love piece. That's certainly been a emphasis of what I've wanted to provide for him, is just that he always knew that he was loved, and really what love is. Because in ways, I didn't really start figuring out a lot of this stuff till my 30s. Specifically getting out of the analytics around these things and into the experience of them.
That's right.
So I'm just so grateful that, again, I mean, I know he's got a long, awesome life ahead of him, but I think he's on a pretty good track for now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I remember one time at an evolution project, there was a man that was sharing some personal experiences that he went through. And then he's talking about, he said, no one ever really taught me how to be a father. And the next line he said just was like a pile driver. He goes, I just don't want to F up my kids. And I was just like, brother, nobody does. Nobody does. Right. And it's just like when we have this consciousness that we bring to this thing we call fatherhood, this thing we call embodiment inside of us through doing the work, which can look so different, right? It can look like a yoga practice. It can look like a breath work. It can look like going for a walk in nature. It can look like a really great journal session. It can look like just being witnessed by a brother or a friend. Like it can look so different. But when people say, what is the work, quote unquote, my belief is life is just going to keep showing you what the work is. The question is how much consciousness do you bring to the work?
Yeah.
How much surrender do I bring, you bring, we bring to the work? Because there's parts of us that die along the way. It's the last part I said that you said, we form identity from that like 2 to 8. We then live, we embody it 8 to 16. And then here's the last line, 16, the rest of our lives, we try to undo it.
Yeah, unpack it all and choose our own path.
That's right. That's the right way to say it.
And that and that's the power. I mean, because we, especially men, I mean, but in the West, women too, like we're taught reward for performance, right?
Yeah.
It's not awareness. We're taught accomplishment. We're taught production as opposed to feeling, experience. And so I think a lot of people, and I have at times too, like even when you talk about self-work or anything else, like we focus so much more on the effort side of it as opposed to the integrative side of it, which is silence, which is crying by yourself if that's what it takes, or in the presence of others, which is like actually just like being like detached from all the stories going on in our heads, so that the next time I show up with Henry or with my friend Bryan or with a client or whoever, like I am a more clear, conscious vessel to ultimately, like, what's the point? To ultimately help others with whatever they need. Like,
Yeah.
I really like, one of my favorite quotes is from Ram Dass, where he talks about, like, when you see a child suffering, like, you don't go into your trip about consciousness and God and like all your experience and beliefs. You don't try and teach them. You relieve suffering. That's it. And the only way we can do that truly is if we really do, you said it at age 16 and still doing it at 40, like, get rid of who I think I am just so that I can show up for who someone needs me to be. And not that, we're special or on a pedestal or anything else. Because again, what most people need is just a blank slate that's willing to hold space for them.
Amen, amen, amen. You know, it's funny. When I started doing Evolution Project, there was this part of me that wanted to fix people, including myself, right? And somewhere along the journey, quickly, fortunately, but at times it would come up again and again. I just have these moments where it's like, Bryan, this has nothing to do with you, dude. Like, you are facilitating a conversation and an experience. And if people get value from it and they're able to, that is awesome. And if they didn't, that's okay too. We live in this binary world, good and bad, right? And it's like, wait, is everything binary? Is everything binary? And what I found is, as I detach from it, which is damn hard, okay, it's not easy, but as I start to like remove myself a little bit from these constructs of good and bad, right? And then you start embracing these concepts of like, I can be engaged and fully present, and I can be detached at the same time. I start to have these experiences where I can kind of see the ether, and it's this like mystical kind of like flow of life where I'm just flowing with whatever is happening in that moment. And I know you're smiling right now because I've shared experiences with you specifically like this. I'm in a breathwork session and I'm trying to like work through something, and I'm breathing and I'm breathing and I'm breathing. And all of a sudden, I feel Matthew's hand on my chest. Just a strong, just like, it's safe. I'm present with you. I can see you're in it right now. And it's like, usually shortly after, like, I feel that. And it's like, there's a release. There's like that feeling of like letting go, of surrendering in the moment. And then it's like there's this euphoria that comes where it's like, that felt really good. I'm so grateful that I was able to experience this moment. And then you're right. And then I come back into my life and I show up for my kids and my wife and my friends in a different way, because that block has now been excavated and there's this opening inside of me that I'm able to more fully experience this thing called life. And I mean, Matthew, the thing that I would really love, as we kind of start to wrap things up, I would maybe, what would be the conversation you would have somebody that comes to you and says, hey, I'm thinking about doing this breath work thing, like, what would you say to them? What would you say to the person? Because we're going to be doing something here in March coming up really soon. And my hope is that my friends come because I know how much impact you've had in my life and in the lives of people that you've done this for. And so, I mean, Shauna the other day, she literally reached out to me and she's like, hey, will you send me Matthew Clark's phone number? I really want to go do a breathwork session with him. And I'm like, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What immediately comes to mind is like, how do you sell something without selling it? Because what's cool is breath work, more than anything else, I've come to understand, accept, appreciate the power that I have as a being, as a human being, as an energetic being, which energy is what you need to create great change and transformation in your life. I'm pausing, trying to decide if I want to go here or not, but I am going to go here. There's a lot of people, and I'm sure several of your listeners are familiar with some of the different plant medicines, and specifically ayahuasca, or I just forgot the toad, the name Bufo alvarius. These are exogenous sources of DMT, which is a chemical that can help with that energetic transformational process. I'll just leave it at that. In addition to doing a lot of other things, we produce DMT in our lungs, and breath work gives you the capacity to move not just DMT, but everything up and down your spine, up and down all your different energetic centers, okay? Where most people, I would say, get stuck in their lower centers, down at the root, their feelings of safety, security, and maybe into like their sexuality, and they get blocked there. So this is just it has the potential to be, I mean, it's not every time for every person, or, right? There's no, but it has the potential to literally unlock levels of consciousness, levels of emotional well-being without any exogenous substance, but to the same level that the most powerful substances in the world can provide. Like that's why it's a safe practice. You're in control the entire time. It's essentially like driving a vehicle where you can put one foot on a gas pedal to go deeper into your own experience, or you can always slow down, put your foot on the brake, and bring yourself out of it. But that's what's great. You're in control the whole time, with the ability to go deeper than maybe you've ever experienced with your psyche self.
Hey, Matthew, as we wrap things up, is there anything you'd like to share that's on your mind or your heart that you'd like to leave us with? And that was beautiful right there.
It's funny, like for me, when you said, like, when we started this conversation and it's like, what is breath work? I'm to a point in my experience, understanding, awareness of breath, that it still baffles me that so many people are still so unaware of their breathing.
Yeah.
Because again, this is the one and only remote control that you have to change your nervous system state. And so I would argue, again, going back to college sports, going back to my time as a CrossFit gym owner and athlete, in every aspect of my life, physical ones, relationships, everything. The tools that I've learned from not just one breathwork journey, to be clear, but from learning to master my breath, I look back and realize would have positively influenced every aspect of my past, and does every aspect of my present and future. It's an immediate tool to presence, which
Yeah.
is certainly something that once people experience, they know they want more of.
That's right. That is absolutely right. It's a connection with your body is what happens. I remember one time I wrote in my journal and I said, through my body, I will learn things that I could not learn through my mind. And breathwork has been absolutely a portal. It's been a bridge. It's been an aid. It's been a tool that I've been able to put in my toolbox that I have access to. And, I love the mantra that I'm 3 to 4 breaths away from getting present in the moment.
For sure.
Just sitting there, straight spine. I'm a really big fan of scents with oil and smells. Like whenever I do, I see that. I see that. Like whenever I do peppermint, I love peppermint. Peppermint is a cleansing present. Like it grabs me and says, it's just like, and it's really cool. Like we really can train our mind and our body through our senses, right? Through the things we see, through the things we hear, through the things we smell, through the things we feel, right? Through our breath. We're that close away. And ironically, I always like to say, God hides the mysteries of the universe right in front of our face, because that's how it works. We want to make it so more complicated than it actually really is. It doesn't have to be complex.
You're making me think about animals again, and
Okay.
again, the major difference between other mammals and ourselves, which is the development of our prefrontal cortex, right? And
Right.
what a great blessing it is that we're able to think. So are other animals. The difference is other animals don't sit around and think about their thoughts, right? Like they nature requires, but they also live present, moment
Yeah.
to moment. And a lot of people think they're thinking throughout the day. They think that's what's going on in their brain. But the reality for most people is they're either ruminating about the past or they're planning for the future,
That's
which
right.
no judgment on either, but it keeps you from being in the present, from experiencing reality as it is, which I would agree with the statement you made. The mysteries are right here, right now. So find your breath, get present,
All right. Well,
do it.
before we end, if somebody wanted to find you, what would be the easiest way to reach out if they wanted to connect with you?
Yeah, I do have an Instagram. I'll have a couple of group breathwork events in March. I know ours is on the 17th. I'll do one on Tuesday the 10th as well. Yeah, those will be my next ones. I'm actually headed to Hawaii for a week next week. So then we'll get back to some breathwork when we get back.
Awesome. Well, Matthew, I think
I want to give your listeners too, you and your listeners, I want to give you a week free access to the Breathwork app that I use and
okay.
I facilitate from, and there's no strings attached there, just a free week, hop on and get a little bit of introduction and yeah, enjoy.
We can put that in the links
Sure.
with the podcast as well, so we can let people know about that.
Cool.
Can you tell us the app right now, or how would we do that?
Yeah, it's 9D, like 9 dimension, 9D breathwork. And I'll take 30 seconds just to say you
Yeah.
referenced turning on music and breathing together. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that. That's in a way like the way most people do it. What we're able to do with 9D, they're all pre-recorded journeys that are really building on different sound components that you wouldn't otherwise get. Things like binaural beats, isotonic frequencies, subliminal messaging. So it really allows participants wear headphones, and it allows, again, just deeper and deeper access to the subconscious that you wouldn't have without those extra modalities present.
Yeah. And, yeah. Check it out. That's all I got to say. Like it's absolutely worth checking out because that is one of the things that you bring that is different. And I like that. So, all right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening and being here present with us at the Evolution Project podcast. And until next time, guys, don't forget to breathe.
Don't forget to breathe. Thanks, Bryan.
Yep.
Stay